Hi, everybody, and welcome to How's That Working For You? My name is Brian Robinson. I'm the shrink.
And I'm Monica Parker, and I'm Smarty Pants.
Boy, is she ever. Would you believe that she made me carry her wardrobe in this morning? I mean, come on, Monica. Who do you think I am? You don't realize who I am.
Well, I think you were the person who carried my wardrobe in, so thanks very much.
Smarty Pants. She's actually sassy, but she's also whip smart, as you're going to see in today's show. I'm so excited. One of my favorite people is here, and one of my favorite authors is here. And today we're going to talk a little bit about if you're stuck in your life somewhere. We have an expert who's going to tell you how to get unstuck. She's a psychotherapist. She is the author of the book, The Science of Stuck, which is fabulous. I've read it. And she's going to tell us how to get unstuck. And I've been stuck before. You probably have never been stuck, Monica, but I have.
I'm sorry, I'm a human being. I have been stuck.
We've all been stuck. We're playing around, but we have all been stuck.
Absolutely.
I want you all to welcome in your own way, Britt Frank. Hi, Britt.
Hi, Britt.
Hi. Hello. It's so good to be here. Likewise.
It's so great to have you here. The first question I want to start with is your story, because I was mesmerized as I read your book, especially all the things when you were stuck, all the ways you tried to get unstuck that did not work, and then what finally did in the end. I mean, you were in a cult, you tried drugs, I think you tried relationships, probably more than I can remember. I was heartened by all the things.
Don't out this woman that way.
I think this woman is open to anything I ask. That's what I love about her. So tell us a little bit about how you got unstuck and what you were looking for.
So I really love the word stuck because not everybody identifies as having a mental health challenge. Not everyone identifies with the word trauma. That word has gotten a little bit overused in the zeitgeist, but being stuck is such a human experience. I know no people who don't have some version of being stuck. Mine was on the extreme end. So I tried the extreme versions of a lot of things to get unstuck. I thought if spirituality is something I heard is good for you, so I'm going to join a cult and do it the most extreme. I heard medication could be helpful. So I went into opiates and crystal meth, which was not helpful. Neither was the cult. Ultimately, I was both encouraged and dismayed to learn that the tools of getting unstuck are simple. Life is not simple. I don't think anyone would look at the world and say, hey, you can just snap your fingers and in 3 easy steps get unstuck. But when it comes to closing the gap, the researchers call it the intention action gap, aka why am I not doing what I want to be doing? The tools are simple. And learning about the neuroscience, it's amazing that we all walk around with this equipment, these brains and these bodies. And I don't know about the two of you, but I was never given an owner's manual.
I wasn't given one either. So how did you didn't have an owner's manual. How did you get unstuck?
Sure. I wish I could say I had my, here was my rock bottom and then everything changed. And that's a wonderful Hollywood story. And for people who have that story, I'm super psyched for them. For me, it was, I read a book on internal family systems and discovered that we all have parts of our psyche. And then I read a book by Peter Levine and learned that I have a nervous system. And over time, those tools broadened and I was privileged to have access to really good help where I learned about things like the nervous system and the parts of our mind. And the really IFS and somatic work was the game changer for me.
For me, reading your book, I felt like you were your own exorcist. And that you banished your evil demons that had become the voices in your head. And my question to you is, are you ever worried that it could come back?
I really love that question, because the reality is no one's ever said that I was my own exorcist, and I kind of love that. But what I actually learned was that these things that I thought were demons, that I thought were all of these evil voices in my head compelling me to do bad things, were valuable parts of my inner world. And when I learned how to work with them, things got now. The analogy I give is, if you're an animal person and you rescue a dog that's been wounded, that dog is going to bite and snarl and growl. And that doesn't mean that the dog is possessed by a demon. It means that that dog has not been trained into an understanding of safety and relationship and community and acceptance. And you can't just positive think a rescue dog into better behavior. You have to have the skills to train them. And ultimately, the tools that I now practice as a clinician helped me realize they're not like demonic attacks in my head, and they're not evil voices. They're wounded children screaming for help. And then once you learn how to work with them and you unburden them, life gets better really quickly. It's phenomenal. So no, I'm not afraid it'll come back, because I know that with proper care and feeding, my inner children, my inner rescue dogs, are quite lovable and lovely to do life with.
I wanted to add one thing to what you're saying. I love the way you just
Me too.
out. For people who are watching and listening, you're calling them parts, and sometimes we do feel like they're our enemy, or they're evil, or they're demons, but they're not. They're all trying to help us in their own way, even though it doesn't feel like it, right? So all those things you tried were your parts trying to get you out of the stuck, but they kept you stuck.
Exactly.
Right?
And this is really important to nuance, that understanding the function of my behavior is not a synonym for giving justification to my behavior. So I have learned, and the model that I practice from looks at addiction as a functional adaptation to pain. Doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it should be justified or excused. But understanding that my parts that compelled me to do very, very, very bad things, the behaviors aren't acceptable, but the intention is self-protective, not self-destructive. And that reframe was for me and for many people a game changer.
First of all, we have a great question from the audience, but before I get to that, because to piggyback onto what you just said, I'm curious, were you in your family, were you an only child? Were you a rebellious child? I mean, how did this begin for you? At what age? Because I think that's interesting.
Yeah. So I was the good girl. If we're talking family systems roles.
Okay, I'm shocked, but go ahead.
I was the hero. I was the good girl. I did not have any social abilities. I didn't have friends, but I really loved to read. And so I found that I could dissociate into books and disappear. And I don't know why my particular neurodivergent brain took so quickly to traditional school, but it did. And I just escaped into school. If I was reading or doing schoolwork, I didn't have to deal with what was happening around me. And so up until I started talking back, then I was like, oh, look, Britt's so studious. I'm like, I'm not studious. I'm depressed and dissociated, but I like to read. So, okay, I'll get good grades. But when I was 16 and all those adolescent hormones crept in, and I started questioning the system, that's when I became the scapegoat or the black sheep. And I have not changed my position since. I still occupy the black sheep role in my family.
I actually applaud you. I like black sheeps. So our question from the audience is, hi, Britt. No matter how hard I try, when times get tough, I continually have this little voice inside my head that tells me I'm a failure, that I'm worthless. How do I deal with this internal critic?
Oh, I have so much compassion, because let me normalize. I've worked with people for thousands of hours in every level of life and functionality. Everyone has that voice. Now, you are not alone. You're not crazy. There's no such thing as a crazy person. So first, let's normalize the dilemma. The inner critic is we all have one. And without knowing your story or your context, I'll give you an internal and an external tool that you can use. The first one is, we all think of our inner critic. I shouldn't say we all. Many of us think of our inner critic as this mean parent, or this very, very powerful overlord, or a boss that has the power to fire us. What if you looked at your inner critic as a little kid having a tantrum? I hate you. You stink. I don't like you has a very different implication than you are not lovable. You are getting fired and everything that you care about is I'm going to take away. So if you can train yourself to view the inner critic as a 3-year-old who's tired and hungry and lonely, that takes some of the fear factor out of it. And so that's an internal tool that I like. And it takes practice because we're so used to just accepting the voice of the inner critic as a powerful, bigger than life type of enemy.
I think that's really important to get.
I always think of it as the Wizard of Oz, at the end of the journey, it's not a big booming voice. It's just a little tiny part of us, as you say, a part. It's not who we are. It's an aspect of who we are. And if we can get that and talk to it and separate from it, it can make a big difference in getting unstuck.
A lot of the cultural wellness, mental health, personal growth material encourages us to banish the inner critic or kick the inner critic to the curb or, kill it and make it go away. But
combat it or fight it. Yeah.
It's funny. I have friends who have a little child, and whenever he has a tantrum, they always ask this question of him. They say, does this get you what you want? And I sort of feel like what you're talking about is in our own inner voice, if we're asking ourselves, is this behavior that I'm exhibiting right now getting me what I want? Likely no.
That one's tricky too, because on paper, if you were looking at, I'll use myself, my choices looked incredibly destructive. But if what I wanted was self-preservation and escape from a toxic system, I was in fact getting what I want. And that gets into Jungian shadow work. Like how could you say that this is what I want? Because clearly it's destroying me, but there's a degree to which all behavior is functional or the behavior wouldn't be there. So is the kid getting what he wants? Well, if he wants attention, tantrums will do that. Right? If he wants to feel better, he's not going to get what he wants. But if he wants somebody to pay attention to him, tantrums are often reinforced by negative attention.
So as we've said, we all get stuck in life at some point in time. I can't imagine getting through life without that. So can you talk a little bit about the science stuff and what that means?
Yes. And this is really help. Again, you don't need advanced neuroscience training to understand the basic science of stuckness is thinking about your brain like a car. We need a gas pedal and a brake pedal, which is why stress is not the enemy. Bad stress is, but it's like cholesterol. There's bad stress and good stress. There's bad cholesterol and good cholesterol. And if we understand that the goal of life is not this steady state of happiness, because that's not how brains brain. The goal is to be able to shift between the gas pedal and the brake pedal. Too much gas, we're going to feel anxious and panicky and overwhelmed. Too much brake pedal, we're going to feel unmotivated, exhausted, fatigued. At the extreme levels, we'll feel depressed. But when we know that we can engage our vehicle we need both. And how great is it that the goal is not how do you get more motivation? How do you get more strength or more willpower? It's how do you engage the clutch and how do you shift? That question you can answer, which is incredibly good news.
And you talk about this in your book, The Science of Stuck.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the tools people can use that you mentioned in the book to get unstuck?
Yes. I got so mad, Brian, when I learned some of these. It was how much money have I spent on therapy, grad school, destroying my life, cleaning my life up, and simple tools like putting an ice pack on my face when I'm stressed can create the distance between impulse and reaction. Things like sensory inputs. Often we try to positive think our way into a good choice. But if our body is in a state of shutdown, if we're in a freeze response, if the brake pedal is engaged, you can't think your way out of a brake pedal. You need to take your foot off the brake pedal. And a tool to do that is things like getting cold or fidgeting or smelling something, because the language of the stuck part of our brain is sensory. It's not cognitive. So rather than trying to think our way forward, we want to either move, like if you're stuck on the couch and you're procrastinating by binge watching Netflix, you'd be shocked what just turning yourself around on the couch can do. Just reorienting your body can, again, we're not magicking our way out of our stuckness. It's can we create some spaciousness between our impulse and our choice? The more space we have, and Viktor Frankl said that, in between stimulus and response is a space.
Yeah.
And in that space is our ability to choose.
Yeah, that's where our freedom comes from. I love that quote.
Exactly. Me too.
One of the things I wanted to add on to what you're saying, in the book, you talk about don't just ask why, because that can keep you stuck, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you relate to this. I became a psychotherapist. I want to know why humans do these weird things. I want to understand everything about why. Why is a wonderful place to dive and swim around in. But when we're stuck with anxiety, stress, depression, overwhelm, whatever the thing is, you do not want to start with why. And Simon Sinek, whom I absolutely admire, and his entire body of work is start with why. That's great if you're in the business world. That's great if you're launching something or building something or managing something. When you're stuck with procrastination or feeling like a failure, you don't want to start with why. That's like asking, why is the building on fire? It's like, get out. We'll figure out why it caught on fire later. So I encourage my clients, why matters, but not as a first order of business. Why is a mile 6 issue, not a starting gate issue. So don't worry about why. Rather than why, ask what are my choices and what am I willing to do right now?
I read a great quote of yours, sort of plays into this. When it doesn't feel like home inside ourselves, we search for it inside the people we love, the work we do, the things we buy, but it isn't there. I love that quote. So where is it? In us?
That's my favorite sentence that I've ever written, ever, in like my entire existence of journaling and writing and whatever. That's my favorite word sentiment, because really this idea of searching for home, and I'm not saying we don't need other people. I'm not saying we don't need other humans and connection, and the things that we buy and the places that we go and the relationships that we enjoy are vital. But this pervasive sense of homesickness that we all have is really the hero's journey, right? The search for home ultimately needs to be an internal journey, not an external. Home is an internal state. I think it was Rochelle Goodrich who said, home is where I know you, I love you, and I accept you are the sentiments. If we don't build a home inside, nothing external will satisfy us. So we need both relationships outside, but home is ultimately an inside job.
An inside job. I love that. So home is where the heart is.
And the head is, and the nervous system is, the parts are, and everything. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're so used to looking outside for the answers, and it takes us away from where the answers are. Sometimes we have to go into the dark to find what to get unstuck, to find what we need to make that happen.
And that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
Do you have any other parting wisdom thoughts that we could leave our audience with?
Yes, because these are very big concepts. It's like building a home inside of me and making friends with my inner critic. These can feel very big and overwhelming. So a tool I'd like to leave everyone with is called a micro yes. Don't worry about why. Don't worry about self-love. A micro yes is the teeniest, tiniest step that you can do right now without getting in the weeds of your mind or your parts or your nervous system. A micro yes for the gym might be, don't take a walk. Just put your shoes by the door and then go back to bed. But if you can start practicing micro yeses, those build capacity, those build a sense of I can, those release dopamine, those reduce cortisol. Micro yeses are the building blocks of a life, regardless of where on the spectrum of stuckness you find yourself. So do your micro yeses and then message me and tell me how they went.
So on that note, the idea of stuck, when you put that all together and you decided to write this book, I'm just curious, how long ago did you start writing this book? Were you in the middle of trauma, or were you on the coming through side? Had you been making notes about, it's such a important, there's a lot of stuff in stuck.
There is. So I have been in recovery for quite a while. I started making notes. I didn't know the notes would become the book, but I realized that I was at a point where my life was working pretty well. No one's life is perfect, but I'm like, wow, I'm happy. I'm healthy. I'm functional. I've accumulated all of this incredible knowledge from different teachers and mentors and resources. I want to share it. Now my tank is full. It's time to give. So I just started writing on Instagram, trying to synthesize, because a lot of the research is really hard to get through and it's really like dense. So how do you distill all of this great info down so it's easy to digest? And then eventually I looked at my Instagram and went, oh, wow, I have been boarding a book this whole time. And then I decided to go into the black hole of querying and pitching and finding a publisher and that whole process. But I was really set on, I have a message and I have a mission. And so that kept me going through that process, which, 3 years of rejections and you're not good and we don't like you can be disheartening. So I was set on, I have something to share and I'm not going to be stopped.
Boy, do you ever. You really do. We'd like to know how people can find you.
Yeah.
Where can they find you so they can hear more about your mission and your message?
Yes. So if you're on Instagram, that's where I spend a lot of time writing. And it's just my name at Britt Frank, and Britt has 2 T's. My website is scienceofstuck.com. You can buy the book wherever you buy books. And I also love doing corporate keynotes. So if your company wants all their people to get unstuck, I would be happy to chat.
I love your Instagram. I'm there for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Britt.
Thank you. This was great.
You're wonderful, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Wow. I think I'm unstuck. What about you?
I'm feeling a little less sticky.
Me too. That's a good thing, though.
No, this was great. And I really, I love this idea of parts, as you say. Absolutely. It makes it. Well, what it does is actually breaks things down into bite-sized pieces so that you're not feeling, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed.
It concretizes what's inside of us.
I've never heard that word before.
Well, it makes it concrete. We can see the skeletal system. You can't see the internal system. So when we talk about parts, it helps us break it down. It helps us actually work with them directly. So Britt talks about this in her book, so you can get more information there. But I would encourage all of you who are listening and watching to find that place where you are stuck and find out some ways from Britt Frank and hopefully from today's podcast on how you can get unstuck.
And I would encourage you to find us on our YouTube channel so that we can continue bringing you these wonderful guests and nuggets of wonderful things from my friend, the most amazing therapist ever.
And the amazing smarty pants in a good way. Thank you all for being here. Really
Thank you.
Seeing you the next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.